This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground. Holy ground.
This is a journey into sound.
This is a Spirit Session podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
Hey there, beautiful. So I just want to ask you a really important question. What are you going to do with this one sacred and precious life? Because here's what I know. I know that the listeners of our podcast are spirit seekers. And if you're anything like me, you may sometimes feel more than a little bit bummed out and astounded even by the state of the world today. It can be super disheartening to read the mainstream news and be told that there is no cause for hope and no future to delight in. And you know what? I call bullshit on that. You see, we really do live in polarized times. And so much of what we talk about here in this podcast and in Shakti School is what the brain does when it's polarized. It's the opposite of healing. It actually causes inflammation to live in that fight, flight, freeze, polarized state of us versus them. But I personally really do understand the feeling of being stuck and being anxious about the state of the world and even the state of our lives. You may feel like your life is not turning out the way you envisioned. And some of you who are listening to me today may feel like, oh, you know what? My life looks like everything is going great on the outside, but on the inside, it's a totally different story. In my experience of working with literally thousands of women all over the world, I have found that every single one of you out there wants the same thing. You want to feel more fulfilled, more joyful, more alive, more creative, more self-empowered, and more connected. And perhaps most importantly, what I've seen is that women want to feel like they belong to themselves. They want to feel like they belong to themselves and they can connect with a community and make authentic connections. But what I also see is there's a deep missing link that is keeping us from this longing. We know we want personal and collective empowerment, but we're not sure how we can get there. And I'm not talking about Pollyanna, only love and light type self-helpy spirituality stuff. I am not talking about just taking a yoga class or, saying some positive affirmations and lighting some incense and maybe doing a moontime ritual and thinking that everything's going to turn out okay. I'm talking about something a lot deeper and a lot richer. I'm talking about the best of ancient mysticism meeting modern neuroscience. I'm talking about the best of folk medicine meeting and, yes, appreciating modern Western allopathic and functional medicine. I'm talking about smart people who have massive hearts. That is what we are doing over here at Shakti School. It is the opposite of polarizing. It is unifying. And after all, from everything I've studied, that still is the meaning of the word yoga. I believe that every single human being on this planet is longing for the same thing. We all want to feel real. We want a direct line to something beautiful and infinite. We can call it God. We can call it the universe. I mean, hell, you guys can call it the great universal cosmic crystal yoni palace. You can call it what you want. And it's what we're all wanting. And you may be thinking, yeah, but not everybody wants that, Katie. What are you talking about? And I'm saying to you, yes, they do. Every time we overeat, every time we binge on alcohol, every time we do drugs, every time we watch porn, whatever, overshop, freaking get in a fight with someone on Instagram. Every time we do that, it is just a covering over a deeper longing to know that infinite love. The bottom line is that we all want the incredible confidence and empowerment that comes from knowing exactly who we are and what our personal soul DNA is and what we were made to do on this planet. And we need the tools and practices and support to be able to manifest that purpose in the world. Guys, without tools, and without that personal divine connection, I don't care how much money you have, how powerful you are in the world, how many supplements you've taken, how many G-spot multiple orgasms you've achieved, how many sauna ice baths you've dunked yourself into. Without spirit, life is going to be really difficult and a hell of a lot less fun. In my opinion, the people that are going to not only survive but deeply thrive on the planet in the next few years are the people who are not building themselves up on sinking sands, the sinking sands of our modern culture, but who are solidifying themselves into an enduring force of love and power. When you have that kind of connection to your own soul's mission and a spiritual force on your side, there's literally, I don't think there's anything you can't accomplish. When you have a connection to your realest self, your truest purpose, and that spirit that lives inside of all of us, guess what? You become a lightning rod for attracting the right people and circumstances into your life to fulfill that mission. And you become a lightning rod for being able to transmit and channel a higher purpose into the world. You become a lightning rod for creativity. Guys, that means you can supercharge your business. You can finally write that book you've been holding back on. You can better your health. You can invent a world-changing technology. You can create beautiful art, become a better lover, and become a better parent to your kids. Your confidence to speak your highest truth and stand in your conviction as your best, most loving, courageous version of yourself is really what it's about. I want a powerful tribe of lionesses prowling this planet. And it doesn't matter if you work at the drive-thru at McDonald's, which, by the way, we have women through our scholarship program that have done that. Or if you are the CEO of some company and work in a high-rise in New York City, we have those women in our course as well. But both of those women need a system. We need a method. We all need a science-backed way of altering our brain and healing our hearts. We need a course of instruction that's going to take us from point A to point B, where we go from feeling afraid and powerless to feeling courageous and supported and seen and wanted. And that's exactly why I created this school, Shakti School, and why I created Ayurveda School Level 1. This course offers you a structured system backed by thousands of years of research and a team of over 15 expert teachers and staff who are going to make you laugh and cry and will stimulate your mind and your energy body more than any other course on this planet, and I stand behind that. You will learn my own translation of feminine form, mystical Ayurvedic medicine that will tap into something your intuition already knows, and that is that you, dear listener, know how to heal yourself. And it all starts with love and compassion. In this course, yes, we go into the basics of the Ayurveda worldview, but it doesn't stop there. You will learn conscious self-sovereign sexuality, herbology, moon rituals, astrology, mantra, yoga for your doshas, goddess manifestation and empowerment, somatic trauma release, nervous system healing, Ayurveda for women's issues, fertility, postpartum, and menopause, as well as my signature approach to holistic medicine that understands that we are not just our imbalances and our diseases. We are spiritual beings here on earth to learn who the heck we are. And that's just a short list of what we are going to be doing over here in 2022 Level 1. In this course, you are going to get all the practical tools you need to up-level your life and supercharge your dreams. I guarantee that you will go from being a spiritual wolf howling alone, perhaps in the darkness, to a member of a community who can hold one another in conscious support. You will learn what exactly is blocking your light and your success, and you will release your patterns of self-sabotage. You will get the tools that you need to navigate this upcoming year so that even the challenges that we are all going to face, they are going to become the seeds of our new potential. You will go from living a life of pain that pushes you to a future vision that pulls you. Ayurveda School Level 1 is unlike any other online course. And it's not because there aren't other amazing Ayurveda schools out there, because there are. But we are different because this is feminine form Ayurveda. It is a mystical healing path that not only bows and honors the ancient rules and technologies of India Ayurveda, but also offers a universal medicine-centered approach that defies time, geography, and ethnic background. It's a system that allows women to unfold their healing from within their own intuitive heart. Here at their school, there are no gurus. There's just a safe, healing, fun, inspiring, intellectually rich, emotionally intelligent place for you to awaken the guru within. And this isn't just my lofty opinion about my own baby. We literally receive daily testimonials from our students that make me and my staff, at least me, weep with joy. Like this one, I just got this one from a current level 1. It says, Katie, thank you for changing my entire life with your school. I've cried so many happy and healing tears, so much compassion and endless laughs with you throughout the year. And on top of that, all that wisdom. I must say, when I signed up for Shakti School, it was very intuitive as I made a last minute decision with no experience of Ayurveda before, but I knew in my heart it would be magic. And I actually had no idea how much depth and realness these teachings would give me. And I'm realizing this is mainly because you've been our teacher and guide delivering this medicine in a very unique way. I hope to meet you in person and give you a hug and thank you, as you are such an important person in my own healing and soul's mission. Lots of love from a very grateful student. And I hope I meet you too in person and you know who you are. And that's just one of hundreds of students that have sent us their praise. But here's the thing, guys, and this is important. We only run this course once a year. It's a year-long program because we are committed to doing it live. We've done it now for 4 years, and we could easily make it a recorded course that would run all the time, be a lot less money, a lot less effort, but I feel like that would take away from the incredible energy that comes from all of us being together in a container throughout the year. And whether you're with us during the live class or you're watching it later as you're making dinner for your kids or taking a walk through the woods, there is a real container that we create in 2022. All right, guys, so it starts this January 12th, and we would absolutely love to have you. And yes, this is absolutely a course for people who want to add a money-making potential to their lives as a certified Ayurveda health coach. But it's also for any woman who just wants to take this for herself. We've had many students go on to become Ayurveda wellness coaches. They are incredible. They are inspiring me. They have, helped hundreds and thousands of people, but they've started podcasts. I've been lucky enough to write the foreword to several of my students' books. I love watching my students succeed and hopefully one day even go above and beyond what we're creating here. So it's here for you guys. We are here for you. And I hope we will see your shining face. I hope I get to meet you in school in 2022. And lastly, I have 4 amazing women supporting these efforts. We've got Sarah, Malia, Takesha, and Lindsay, and they have all taken this full course. So if you want to set up a coaching call with them to talk about the course and see if it's a good fit for you, the link to connect with them is in the show notes. You can also head over to theshaktischool.com, hit the Ayurveda link for all the information and an overview, a complete overview of the syllabus for 2022. You can also write my staff anytime. We're at info@theshaktischool.com. All right, beauty, thank you so much for listening, and may 2022 be a remarkable year for all of us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Geese Spot. I'm your girl, Katie Silcox, and we have a really, really special guest, and I feel that way about everybody, but I have been wanting to talk to this woman for years. She was a student in Shakti School. She's done my whole program, and she's quite special, so special that we invited her to be one of the teachers. This is the beautiful and wonderful Marissa Angeletti. And I want to say a little bit about her background. Besides that, she studied with Shakti School. She holds an MA in somatic psychology, dance, and movement. And she is also an Ayurvedic practitioner, movement-based trauma specialist, and therapeutic movement educator. There's a lot more we could say about Marissa, but I also want to say that we brought her into the Shakti School because of her very brave work that she does with, I would imagine, largely women, but she'll tell us more in the realm of holistically healing eating disordered eating. And what I love about Marissa is that she also has a background in Ayurvedic medicine. And so to really see the coming together of an updated version, of what the ancient people probably did not have to deal with as much. So Marissa, welcome to the Shakti School Spirit Sessions.
Thank you, Katie. I'm so glad to be here talking with everyone today and love to spread the Shakti School style of what we do and why we do it.
Yeah, I think I called this the Geese Spot. Sometimes it's both, it's the Geese Spot and the Spirit Sessions. It's all the same.
Aren't they connected anyway?
It's like how nothing happens without the Geese Spot. And then from there we go into everything else. So, I'll just kind of front load this conversation by saying that you and I were talking before we started recording just about how personal this stuff is to me. And, one of the main reasons that I started studying Ayurveda was I'd been doing yoga for so many years, and I just realized that there was this missing piece, and Ayurveda was really helpful in terms of helping me understand the root causes of suffering. But as you know, Marissa, I'm kind of a lover of the tradition, but also not afraid to break the tradition, because one of the big frustrations that I had and still do have with Ayurveda is that I don't think it was like this in its foundations, but I'm sure you can say a lot about Ayurveda can be very rules based. And it's like, oh my God, now you're handing me one more fucking food list and this is just going to stoke my disordered eating even deeper. So that's something I want to come back to. But before we go into it, Marissa, like, how do you define disordered eating? Because even hearing that phrase, I'm like, ugh, can we think of a better phrase?
Well, one thing I like to think about with disordered eating is what is taking you away from your home? What is harming the root of who you are when you're healthy, when you're balanced? And that, in other words, anything that harms your agni, your digestive capacity, could be considered disordered eating. So really, you could kind of soften that term even further and think about, if I'm going against what I know I might need or what I know I want, then it could be coming from a disordered place. And I get really passionate about the language piece because in the psychological world, in the clinical world, it for a long time has been more popular to say eating disorder. And there are clinically diagnosed eating disorders, of course. And a lot of people who have been clinically diagnosed with an eating disorder are actually experiencing disordered eating. And that can include anything from I'm restricting my eating, I'm controlling my portion sizes, I am eating in large amounts uncontrollably, I'm binging and purging what I'm eating, I am eating for the sake of weight loss, I am eating for the sake of changing my body. And that's where this dogmatic Ayurveda can get problematic, because if you say, oh, this is my doshic elemental constitution, I need to follow this list and check all these boxes off, do it right, do it better, you can actually further perpetuate the state of disorder that you're in. Whereas an Ayurveda that is connected to health, that is connected to spirit, says everything is all in. Like everything is literally allowed on the table. And it's about how you come to it and how you engage with it, right? And all sorts of practices you can do for that. But I get really skeptical and kind of scared of anything that says, oh no, like for me personally, I love dark chocolate, right? Well, because of your constitution, you're never ever allowed to have dark chocolate ever again. And no, actually, what if I have a small piece every day, chew it mindfully, and really enjoy the heck out of it, and that can allow me to eat it in an integrated way. We can talk more about how restricting food actually creates a negative domino effect in your physiology and in your emotional body.
Yeah, let's do that.
So let's say if we go with that chocolate example, maybe I've heard from dogmatic Ayurveda, or maybe I've picked up
Which, by the way, we do not at Shakti. Katie Silcox is the most lenient, love-filled. I mean, because of this, Marissa, and I think there's a time and a place to be like, look, if you have this disease or condition, these are going to be the foods that are going to help. But just to interrupt and interject, the true Ayurvedic physician, just like the true yoga guru, to use that horrific phrase, is going to adapt the medicine to the time and the place and the people in which it's being given, and do everything in his or her power to help the person awaken in themselves the discernment to be able to tune into that inner intuition that knows broccoli's okay right now and for some reason not tomorrow, or chocolate's okay right now and not tomorrow. And so that was just a promotion of my school, but really we do believe in that. And I've gotten emails from people being like, you are messing up Ayurveda. And I'm like, actually, no, like this is this feminine form that really is healing lives. So I do really want to go into this restriction, the physiology, the nervous system of restriction, and then what I call like the boomerang effect back. And by the way, before we continue, we said this in the beginning of the call before we were recording, Marissa, like, you guys, this brings up a lot of emotion for me. I mean, this has been my realm of greatest struggle. And it's every single woman I know, with the exception of maybe one or two that are like unicorns. So as you're listening, like, this isn't just like a special group of people. It's everybody I know.
Yeah. Including me. And like you, I came to Ayurveda through yoga, and I wanted something more, and something that was more complete, I think is a good way to say it. And when I got to Ayurveda and I learned about the foods I was scared of, I was scared of food, like many others might be. When I actually hear myself say that sentence, it gives me goosebumps. Like, I'm scared of the things that are supposed to nourish me. It's called fear foods. And when
some of yours fear foods.
So for me, just to give some context for what I'm about to say, there were periods in my childhood where money was really scarce, times were really tight, and that created food scarcity. And when we had that experience of food scarcity, we were able to get things that were cheap, that were easily accessible. And what were they? They were carbohydrates. And I'm Italian, so it was a lot of pasta. And
I'm not Italian, but I love pasta and cheese so much.
Right, like, and we can talk about why, from this emotional hunger point of view. But what happened was there became an association in my nervous system and in my psyche that foods that are like this, foods that are carbohydrate dense, that are pasta, remind me, trigger my system back to a time in my life where I actually didn't have access to other food. And I didn't have access to other forms of nourishment and support either. So the food was not only just, oh, wow, here's this period of my life where we're eating lots of pasta and not much else, but also like, oh my gosh, we didn't have lots of money. Oh my gosh, here's why we didn't have lots of money. Here's the context surrounding that, right? And so I get to Ayurveda, and really for the first time, even after going through therapy for this stuff, I was like, I'm scared of pasta, the Italian gal from New York, like, and it was so sad. But it also made so much sense. And I think if you can identify what the emotion is that is connected to the food, you can start to do a lot of really powerful unpacking, a lot of repair work, we would say, in the therapy world. And you can do an orientation with your nervous system, your younger self, your inner child self, of like, hey, look, now we're 35 years old. This is where we live. Here's the people around us. Here's the food you have in your pantry now, right? Like, does it make sense that you're still so scared of this? Are your circumstances the same? It made sense at the time. And thank you for that information. But now here's some new information.
And so when we restrict, why does because I've seen it over and over in myself and folks in my world who definitely struggle with it even more than I do, that restriction boomerang effect. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So let's say it's the pasta or the carbohydrate. If I say, let's say I'm scared of it, or let's say diet culture has told me it's not good for me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to restrict it and reduce the amount that I take in. I start to think of it as bad. And when I start to think of it as bad and I purposefully avoid it and reduce its presence in my life, then I set up a deficiency physiologically, neurologically, and emotionally. Then what happens is maybe I go home for a visit to see my family and someone offers me a bite of pasta. And instead of having, an appropriate amount to satiate my hunger, I begin to binge on the pasta because my physiology goes, oh my God, we haven't had this in 6 months, or
it's our only chance.
Yes, it literally puts your body in a sympathetic nervous state that says we're in starvation mode. And since you've deprived us of this for so long before, we need to stock up as much as we can now. And so you get this really kind of vicious, like restrict, binge cycle going. And you never really feel satiated, even when you're binging on the food item.
Totally.
And I would even say you don't feel satiated when you're restricting it either. When you restrict love, when you restrict nourishment, that doesn't feel good. So there can be this like atonement, or self-punishment aspect to a restricting food behavior.
So what do you say to people, because I know we're going to get this question.
Yeah.
What do you say to people that are like, yeah, but I have a legitimate gluten intolerance, or I have a lactose intolerance, and that's like one camp. And then there's people like me who, since I grew up, I think a lot of our listeners will resonate, especially those of us born in the 1980s after, our bellies were like fired with Roundup, and there are legitimate gut dysbiosis concerns where, we aren't living in a world where everyone has good agni to necessarily eat every single thing. And yet, I'll tell you, Marissa, from personal experience, when I just kind of eat a moderate amount of protein, like on my plate, I'll have a handful or more of carbs, a handful of vegetables, or maybe 2 handfuls, and then a handful of protein. When I just have that balance on my plate and I eat, and this is not Ayurvedic, by the way, but it really works for me, and it actually is because it's good for Vata nervous system. When I eat, and I eat 5 times a day, I'll eat an apple with you know, a little bit of almond butter, and then I'll have a meal, and then I'll have like a handful of blueberries with 4 or 5 walnuts, you know, or have a yogurt and I end up eating all day long, and I feel satiated all day long, and I'm eating carbs and protein, and you know, I feel great. And then it's like I get into this weird habit of that culture. I mean, I'm thinking about the whole paleo movement, which I get some people have really healed themselves of conditions with that. And so, but it does not work for me. I'll go on a carb bender for like 2 weeks. So, what do you say to people that speak of like autoimmune and gut dysbiosis?
Yeah. So I actually have a longer term Ayurveda client who has Hashimoto's.
Okay.
And we have done a lot of work around this emotional processing piece around her nervous system. Yeah, without saying too much about, to give her away, when she was diagnosed with this, it was, you know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. She's in her 30s now, so she was in her 20s then. And she was going through a really tumultuous time in her life. There was a lot of upheaval. There was not so healthy, nourishing relationships. There was either college or graduate school, I can't remember which, but a pretty demanding schedule. So there were all these sort of relational, cultural, contextual factors that influenced how she was digesting her life, and therefore how she was digesting her food. And at the time of her diagnosis, she did what you're talking about. She cut out carbs, right? She cut out
major restriction.
Yeah, because her doctor said so. And we've talked a lot about how that was really wise. And she says that it helps. Like at the time, it was really helpful to her and it reduced her symptoms and she felt better. But now, over the past few years, she can have some rice every now and again. She can eat gluten-free bread. She's playing with the idea of like asking herself, am I actually gluten intolerant? Because we've been able to do some digestive restoration, we've been able to do some nervous system restoration. It really is holistic. That being said, when there's a real health concern, there's a real health concern.
Yeah.
What I find is lacking and what can be dangerously prevalent in, you know, the Ayurveda and holistic health world is you get these pieces of health advice from people who aren't medical professionals, you know, from people who don't have the training in nutrition. And that's what feeds into the diet culture, pun not intended, like, oh, cut out gluten if you've been feeling lethargic, if you've been bloated, if, you know, your mental clarity is lacking. And who's it coming from? You know, who's telling you that you have this issue? Have you spoken to your care team, right? So I think you have to hold both sides of that, where there may be a legitimate concern, and then how can you treat that concern at the moment?
Yeah, I think everyone, sorry, what was that, Marissa?
Oh, and then how can it evolve, right?
Exactly. Like Agni, our metabolic fire, is an ever ongoing shifting phenomenon. And you know, when I'm super like grateful for your work in the world, because I think it's like deep shadow work. It's almost like as if, you know, I sit here before you and I'm thinking of this archetypal book, Sacred Prostitute. And in that book, it's all about a part of it, and several archetypical books I'm reading right now about when we deny any shadow aspect of ourselves or our society, it will come out in these other ways. And for me, one of the ways that my feminine chaos and wildness and emotion comes out is through a wild relationship to food, where in fact, I do not, I mean, you know, I probably need to, I'm just going to say this on air. I probably need to set up some sessions with you, Marissa, and you have to take me before you take all the other hundreds of women that are going to write you after this podcast airs. Because I'm realizing with all of the work I've done on myself and this ongoing evolution, like this is the one realm where I'm like, okay, not yet, not yet, because it feels this relationship to food feels like the crux of my entire relationship to God. It feels like the pivotal point uh, underneath, there's something else, of course, but like of this relationship to love and nourishment and this shadow side. And so when I sit with you, I almost feel like we're in that realm of something like sacred sexuality and sacred femininity that's also fucking dark. And there's so much shame. And I think my process is I bring people on the show or I talk about the things that I'm involved in or have come through or about to embark upon. And I'm just wondering if you want to speak to the just that dark goddess realm of food.
Yes, I really do.
Great.
I have a few things I want to say about that. So you're absolutely right about the shadow side. And I think if you consider what you said about how much it's connected to God and food, and God and love, rather,
Yeah.
partially that's because food is tangible. Food lives in the physical world. Your body is tangible. Your body lives in the physical world. God and spirit are not tangible. Your nervous system isn't so tangible. And so what begins to happen is you have this internal abstract experience and you need to make sense of it, or you need to connect in a way to something that is part of the world you live in. And one of the easiest ways is through food or through your physical body. And so you think about like sacred sexuality or think about spiritual practice and how common it is that you might have a certain type of food before you engage in a spiritual practice, or you go out on a romantic date with yourself, or you go out on a romantic date with your beloved and there's a special food, right? Like the food has such a way of demarcating what it is we're connecting to in that moment.
And bringing spirit into physicality.
Exactly, bringing spirit into physicality. And, we like to say in our work with Ayurveda that we bless our food before we eat it too. And then we bring your spirit into the food and the food into the spirit. And it's, again, this cyclical process. If we enter into the shadow realm, so let's say we're restricting, or let's say we've eliminated a food group because of whatever reason, I like to equate that to you're in relationship with someone and there's a relational issue of some sort. It would be like you just remove the person and like send them on a boat far away from you.
I'm sure everyone would like to be able to do that sometimes, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Why? Because it's not getting to the root cause, right? So an elimination diet or restricting a food group, something like this, suppresses or bypasses the root cause issue.
Yeah.
So if you send the food or you send the relational issue on a boat far, far, far away, have you actually healed the issue? Or have you addressed a symptom and maybe, given yourself some space, which that can be helpful too, but that's a shadow thing, right? If I am repressing something, if I am neglecting something, if I am denying myself a really basic human physiological need, that's shadow. And that kind of shadow, especially with this work, can be traced so far back for so many of us to when we were really little ones. Like, how many of us were moralized with food, sent to bed without dinner, rewarded with a lollipop for behaving well, receiving a treat food for something. When we do that, we place worth and we place value of the self on the food and the way the food is being presented or taken away from us. And so now it's not, I'm being sent to bed early because, I don't know, I spoke back to my parents as I was eating. I'm being sent to bed early without food, without love, without nourishment, because I am bad. And so the language piece there too, right? Like I am bad versus my behavior, maybe was not favorable. The punishment doesn't meet the action. And so we can perpetuate that kind of conditioning into the shadow realm as we move through our life.
And unconsciously, we become that pattern self to self. My situation was so the opposite of that, but equally insidious of like, no one's really paying attention to the depths of me. And so I'm going to go off to my attic bedroom with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which I learned how to make by watching my mom, who would eat like peanut butter and banana and honey, and my grandma that would eat peanut butter and banana and honey. I'd say I come from the honey and peanut butter lineage, where like we get that love typically from like in we're not getting it from the men in our lives, so, or the sexuality in our lives, and so we get it from the peanut butter and honey. And so I would sneak off, and there was a family joke that like Katie would hide peanut butter sandwiches in her piano bench because like I was a pianist, and for me food wasn't restricted. It was like, oh my God, I can't wait to get to my safe, cave where I can have the thing that makes me feel good. And oh my God, like even now, and Marissa, I mean, it's a daily thing to eat consciously for me. And what actually is super interesting, I know what to do. Hello, I have a master's degree in Ayurveda. I am obsessed with this stuff. And I think so many of us know what to do. It just becomes this sort of realm of pleasure for me. And so we've spoke about the restrictive, but okay, maybe we talk about that an overindulgent realm, because that's where I really struggle. I'm like, you know what? I've been working my ass off, and I just taught a 3-hour lecture yesterday to like 100 people, and I like gave them 100,000% of me, and now, oh my God, I'm totally gonna give myself this treat. And so maybe if you could speak to the like pleasure realm, because unfortunately, unlike alcohol or drugs or porn, even sex, we can't not eat. Like God is forcing us to find balance with food.
And that's why it's such a rich opportunity to have spirit in your food and food in your spirit, because it's so integrated in our daily life and our biophysical needs. So if I think about you and your peanut butter sandwich, doesn't it make sense? Like bread, peanut butter, banana, and honey, everything in that is soft and squishy and oily and sweet. So when you say like, I needed this comfort, I needed this love, that food makes 100% perfect sense to me. Where we need to get interested is about the fact that like you hid it in your piano bench or had to, hide it away in your room. Like that begins to go into the shadow. Like I'm not getting this love, this squishiness, this juiciness from relationships in my life, from the way I interact in the world. So I'm going to get it through the food. But there's something about my experience that has told me that I need to hide that away. That I just taught the class and I run the Shakti school, but I don't eat that sandwich. You know what I mean? That's the shadow. I have another client. This is so beautiful what she did, because we talk about this a little bit with her. I'm so in this work and I know these things, and why is it so hard? And it's because you have your physical hunger and your emotional hunger. They're connected. They're intrinsically connected. And so for her, it's a particular fast food item. And we met a few months ago, and she said, I got the thing. And I was like, okay, like let's
Wait, the fast food thing?
yeah, let's talk about it. How did
My
it
God,
go?
I love this.
What brought it on, right? How are you feeling before you got it? How did you feel during eating it? How did you feel after? All this. And she said she was able to do something we had talked about, which was, I think I said this in Shakti school. Imagine you're feeding yourself like you are the goddess. How would you set the table for spirit?
Mm.
And then do that for you, because you're not any different. And she said, I got the thing and I brought it home rather than like starting to eat it in the car. And it like makes me want to cry. I lit candles and I put it on a beautiful plate and I fed myself as goddess. And she said it was a totally different experience. And so I think if we're thinking about like food as comfort or a kind of binge in a way, there is very much a way that we can start to infuse that spirit into it. We can start to look at how is the unmet emotional need, the unmet emotional hunger playing into this binge, because there's restriction in the relational realm, in that way. And then how do I start to bring some consciousness and some love to that?
Mm. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think about my experience with so many women on the planet and the real relationship. I think Janine Roth says your relationship to food is a mirror of your relationship to God. And man, I have such a sweet relationship with God. And so I think it's multifaceted, like God is a myriad of relationships with God herself. But I also would add to Janine's quote and say, it's also a relationship. It's also a mirror to her relationship to sex.
Yeah.
And I think so many women, and I've had to do this in a way, in a healthy way, kind of, you know what, I'm just going to restrict sexuality for a while to really know myself, to really get clear on who I am, to really refine that relationship with God. And that's been a really beneficial and beautiful thing, because I'm very judicious with whom I share sexual energy. But the shadow side to that is that, oh my God, like I'm like this juicy, sexy woman, and that's actually not a big part of my life right now. And so, can you give any advice around or any insight into your experience with people and sexuality relating to food? And then what can we do? I mean, it seems I'm just seeing the goddess spread for the food being similar as the self-pleasure or the self-kindness. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be the same as being with someone else. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, there's that relational component. And I would think that in this idea of like everything gets to be all in, how can we have that piece of sacred sexuality with another person and still feel that deepening connection to God at the same time? Like what is it in our experience and our practice and our teaching that has told us we can't have both? Who did that come from? Why did they say it? Right?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write that phrase down on a sticky note. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit relevant to the quote I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
So I recently had a baby and became a mother, and I've kind of discovered this new world of spirituality and spiritual practice through motherhood. And I happened to come upon this book called Rewilding Motherhood by Shannon Evans. Any mamas out there, highly recommend you read. But she talks about the conditioning we've experienced as women. And although this is not directly related to sexuality, I think it applies very strongly. She says that most mothers are not content. We could say most women Most
Are
women are not content.
They're not sexually content.
Yeah. They are hungry for a deeper spiritual life, hungry for inner healing, hungry for intimate friendships, hungry for more of themselves. Yet we are immersed in a society that has always told us the hunger of women is bad, dangerous, undesirable. We have been indoctrinated in every possible way to believe that our hunger will make us too big, too indelicate, too uncomfortable, too small, too uncomfortable to be around. Here, have this small salad and be satisfied. Here, have this small life and be content.
Mm. Wow.
Mm-hmm. So if I think about that in relation to this sexuality question, why do I have to play it small with my sexuality? Why do I have to be content with restricting that? If I have this juiciness, if I have this ojas, if I have this vital force that's wired into me, is that not as biophysically important as the growling in my stomach?
Mm.
And perhaps could I access that spirit more fully, more powerfully, if I let that energy flow the way it wants to flow, rather than cutting it off?
Babe, if I let it flow the way it wants to flow, I'm going to be walking over to the UVA, finding myself a nice young 21-year-old in the middle of the lawn with Thomas Jefferson staring on from his statue. I'm kidding. I'm not. I'm like, oh my God, I love this conversation because,
Yeah.
you know, I'm, and this is really making me feel into a lot of the rules from, and I think that there's some goodness in these rules around women being the fire keepers and gatekeepers of sexuality, while at the same time figuring out a way to channel this without endangering myself and putting myself in an emotionally vulnerable place, or, you know, feeling like I'm not being fully met by someone. I've kind of made that inner statement of, I would rather be by myself than with someone that can't really fully meet me. And I think so many women feel that way. And so, okay, that's one level. And then so like, you know, chips and cheese and chocolate are really nice that kind of take that place of a sexual experience. So yeah, I agree with you 100%, but then I'm kind of going scientific and going practical and going day to day. And it's like, oh my Lord, I've gotten in a little bit of trouble when I've just let my full ravenous second chakra, which may or be or less or more purified, run the show.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you said the word channel.
Yeah.
I think that's really important with this. Like, we're not necessarily saying let it run rampant and uncontrolled.
I'm going to be like, hi, everybody. Hi, new incoming class at UVA. If you would like a free bubble bath, just kidding. I'm letting some of it be channeled into this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, where can it be expressed in a safe, contained way?
Right.
But I'm actually really glad this is coming up about like the uncontrollable nature of things.
Totally.
Because this comes up a lot with food and intuitive eating.
Yeah.
Around like, oh well, if I just let myself intuitive eat, yeah, or if I just let myself tap into the power of my sexuality, like it's just going to overtake everything and it's not safe.
Wow.
If I'm just intuitive, I'm just going to eat the chips and cheese all the time, every day, forever, until the end of my days. And actually, no.
That's not actually no. Oh my God, I'm getting an aha. Intuitive sexuality is the same as intuitive eating because you're tapped in and then you're like, no, my body does not like this person, run away, or this feels good.
Yes, and that's the somatic piece, right? Like what is my sensory experience? What is the vehicle of my body informing me about in this moment? And if I can really like get clear and quiet and listen to that, I will know and I can trust that my body is not going to eat chips and cheese every day forever until the end of my days, because
and my body will actually never overeat them.
Exactly. And that when I get that craving for them, for whatever reason, I can go, cool, there's that craving. How does that, interact with my present experience? Is it going to keep me neutral? Is it going to aggravate something and elevate it? Or is it going to drain something? And based on that information, I can choose to, have the chips and cheese or not. And if I do it in a conscious way, that's when I can say, oh, yum, like I'm good. I've satiated that craving, because your body will never inevitably forever without control want chips and cheese or whatever that food item might be.
So for some people it's sugar or whatever. And I know a lot of people are so addicted to sugar that they just cut it out completely.
Right. But that actually makes the physiological need for sugar even higher.
Sweet taste.
Yes. And so then what we get is I've cut out sugar. So what I'm going to do is maybe so maybe I've cut out sugar, but I haven't cut out bread, let's say. Both would live in the sweet taste, according to
even meat, interestingly,
yeah,
is
meat. Yeah. So you could, because it's earth and water. So you could say, I've cut this one thing out because of whatever my reason is. But now maybe I'm overeating these other items, because what my body actually needs, you need sugar to function, is sugar. Or maybe I have excessive sweetness in my relational life. Maybe I'm in relation with somebody who's like smothering me. It's like too
much.
So that's where this emotional hunger comes in really handy, around what's happening with the food, but also what's happening in what I'm doing outside of my food. And then how do those things interact?
Yeah, that's so pure Ayurveda.
Yeah.
The tastes aren't just the food, it's the taste of life.
Yeah. Rasa.
Marissa, I would love, I know you're a new mom and you're probably needing some rest and sleep, so I really appreciate you being here, but I'm really, well, I want people to join the Shakti School, where they will get a lot more of you, and we'll put a link to your personal website at the end of the show. But I would love personally, and I think our listeners would just love, can you walk us through what you do as far as food ritual is concerned? When you're about to eat a meal, or even stand in your kitchen to prepare a meal, what does that process and ritual look like for you?
So you're right, it is different being a mom, a new mom. But I actually think that's a good thing to share. And then I can share, perhaps
pre-mom
baby, or if baby's with, papa or something like that. But right now, if she's with me, like if she's in the baby carrier, which happens a lot because I have a really cuddly baby and I love it, but I often find myself needing to eat something and she's like strapped onto my chest or, I'm cooking something and she's just fallen asleep. And so the context is different. And that can be part of the spirit infused in what I'm digesting in that moment. So for me, one of the biggest things I do, regardless of whether or not I'm with or without baby, is I always pray. I always bless the food. And so if she's there on me or with me, I include her in that prayer. And it becomes part of the experience rather than, oh man, I'm not sitting down super mindfully in my pristine room to have my perfectly balancing meal, right? It's more like, thank you, Spirit. Thank you for bringing me this food. Thank you for the body that can digest it. Thank you for all the people who played a part in bringing this food to me today. Thank you for the health and abundance that this food will bring me, and I wish the same upon these others. Thank you for this baby strapped onto my chest right now. May she experience nourishment from how I nourish myself, right? So I want to integrate whatever I'm doing. So it's baby or it's the fast food thing, right? Like, thank you, Spirit, for this really delicious thing I'm giving myself right now and my ability to choose it consciously. So that's really foundational for me, no matter what. And then I always try to do the basics, which for me are chew the food well, put the utensil down, no, and I like to say notice the first burp. I think especially for people coming from a disordered eating place.
Yeah, it can be too intense.
Yeah, if you just say stop at the first burp, that can be really too much and a little bit triggering. So
Yeah.
notice your first burp. What are your feelings of hunger? What are your feelings of fullness? And just pause. So that can be a really, really nice tool.
What is the purpose of putting the spoon or fork down?
It helps you
Slow down?
yeah, it helps it become less automatic. For a lot of us, if we're not putting the utensil down, what tends to happen is we've picked it up, we put the bite in our mouth, and we're still chewing that bite, and then the utensil is simultaneously coming into the dish and picking up the next bite. So it's just a way to help create more presence by slowing down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cooking since baby has been a little different, but it's similar to what I'm sharing about the prayer and the intentionality. I like to have a clean space before I prepare food. I need that. It's really difficult for me if I don't. Lately, I've been lighting a beautiful scented candle as I cook. It just adds nice ambiance to what I'm doing. And I just really try to be with it. I don't really like to have too much else going on. Sometimes music, mantra, but that's really it. It's just engagement. The food, the eating of the food, the cooking of the food is relational.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, the slowing down. It's also very simple. I'm super convinced that so much is about how we eat and the quantity and not what. You know,
Yes.
when I've eaten in a good mood with a good friend, half of a hamburger and french fries, but I stopped before I was really full, digest that perfectly.
Exactly.
I can eat like a kale grain bowl with avocado and then eat a whole bag of cassava chips, which are apparently healthy, and feel like shit, you know? And so it's like,
Yeah.
it really is like, obviously, I don't think any of our listeners nor you would like say, oh, let's go out and eat a ton of processed food. Like, we have to be aware, but I just think it's so much more simple. And it's really the emotional component behind it that's driving the outer behavior.
100%. I mean, I agree. And the example I give people a lot is like, you're traveling to somewhere that you've been really excited to go to for a long time. And maybe you've like researched the restaurant you want to go to, and you know what you're going to order, and you get there and you're so happy, and you get the dish. And what do? You're like, oh my God, look at it. It looks so good. And you like smell it, and you really engage your five senses. And then you eat it, and you probably eat it slowly because it's something that you've been anticipating for a long time, or something that maybe is a little different from what you would normally eat. And then you have wonderful digestion after, even if it's totally different. And it's so much about how you come to it, how you appreciate it, how you engage with it, as you're saying. The term emotional eating, I think, is a little unfortunate. I think it's been hijacked because I don't think it has to be this disordered, terrible doom and gloom thing. Like, can we reclaim emotional eating a little bit around,
Right, positive emotion.
yeah, loving emotional eating.
I'm so excited. I love that idea of coming to the meal as if it were this like really big deal that you've been looking forward to. And I recently got to spend a few nights with my best friend Mare, and we were doing that. You know, it was like, oh my God, we get to eat together. We never get to eat together. And yeah, and the food was great, but it didn't matter. It was like being with her and being together and tasting things. And yeah, I think because I eat a lot of my meals by myself, I find that is really triggering. And so I want to put on a TV show or a podcast because it makes me feel like I'm with someone else. And so maybe just as the last question, what are your thoughts on eating with distraction? Because I have mixed feelings. Obviously in Ayurveda, you want to eat without distractions, but in tribal social life, you would never be sitting alone by yourself eating. You would be you would be distracted. You would be with your baby. You would be talking to your cousins and aunties, and somebody would be pissing you off and somebody would be making you laugh. It's like, so in a way, I kind of think eating with Ted Lasso making me laugh, and I really fucking love him, is giving me a better experience than eating alone, staring at a wall, chewing the food like some kind of nun. And so I'm curious your thought. This is totally personal questions, but I think a lot of our listeners will appreciate.
Yeah, I'm glad for it. Well, I think what you just said like circles back to the dogmatic piece, right? Like in
Yes.
order to eat Ayurvedically, in order to eat mindfully, one must do this, and it becomes this very rigid, robotic thing. And we forget there's the context of life. So again, I get really cautious around anything that says you can never have Ted Lasso on making you laugh and bringing you joy as you eat your food. Where I get more curious is what's your habitual pattern?
Oh, Ted Lasso.
And then for you, like you saying eating alone is triggering.
Yeah, it is.
Brings me back to you and your peanut butter sandwich when you were alone.
Oh my God, I'm getting totally therapized on air. I love this.
Yeah.
That is so, I'm having an Oprah aha hardcore.
And so then we get to do this emotional nervous system repair work, right? And the nervous system orientation work of who's Katie Silcox now in this moment? What's changed, you know? And normalize. Of course, it feels triggering based on what you experienced and how you grew up. I think a good question to ask with that habitual pattern for any of us is, what's the context? And are you being more loyal in that moment to your health and your healing and your happiness? Or are you being more loyal in that moment to your suffering?
Wow.
And I think if we can do that, then we can have balance, and we can enter this like really inclusive feminine form space.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I probably need to set up some sessions with you. This is like when Katie Silcox encounters this realm, full enlightenment is nigh. This is like the god glass covering.
The goddess is on your plate.
Oh yeah, she's like, come here, you know, and it's like from a somatic kind of place. I mean, this is not new to me at all. This has just been an ongoing journey. And so one of the things I'm really working with is titration, like learning how, like, okay, some days you're going to come home and be with your little girl who feels alone, and you're going to eat mindfully and nurse her back into the present moment. And other days you're going to be like, you know what? No, thank you. Today I'm going to watch Ted Lasso and make it easy on myself, and like finding that pulsation between you know, bringing everything out into the light of consciousness, and slowly letting that process happen. Kind of we didn't get into this, but they'll just have to join Shakti school, but it is an addiction. And so if you just like take someone off heroin, it's really, really hard. And yet there's a way to do it lovingly and titratedly. I don't know if that's a word. And so, you know, just reminding everyone out there, like, this is an addiction like any other. It's the exact same physiological setup as alcohol, as drugs, as sex, whatever the addiction is. It's the same neurological firing.
Oh gosh, what was my thought?
That's been happening to me it's been happening to me all day, and I don't have mom brain.
I got it. It's back. Yeah, some days you're going to be with that little girl and eat mindfully and do the repair work and give her what she needs. And some days you're going to watch Ted Lasso and you're going to eat the peanut butter sandwich. And can you have space for both of those, right? Because I have a little one now, it's so fascinating to watch her with food and her hunger and her emotions. And I think if you have an opportunity, everybody listening, to do that, to watch a baby, to watch a young child, how they relate to their emotional state, how they relate to their foods, you can get some really Really powerful info.
They're primal, and under the age of 2, a baby, even though we love them and they're cute and wonderful, a baby actually doesn't have a sense of right or wrong or good and bad. If given the chance, she will choose to bite your hand off rather than starve. Like, they are these like really primal beings with these like raw, immediate emotions.
Yep. And there's this way that they're so clear because of how primal they are. My little one has been starting solids, and it's very clear what she wants to actually eat, what she doesn't like, and when she's done. There's no, question about it. And there's also no question about, oh, right now she needs a cuddle, or she needs some emotional love, or right now she needs some food. And if you confuse one with the other,
Mad.
you will be told, like,
Wow, interesting.
yeah,
Right, whereas we've kind of merged those two realms.
yes, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So the next time I want to have the whatever naughty food or overindulgence, I probably just need a cuddle. So I should get on that app, Cuddler. Just kidding. I mean, everybody listening to the podcast can be like, poor Katie, somebody go over there and cuddle her. I mean, I have plenty of opportunities to be cuddled by the men in the world. Like, there's like a nice long line of them. It's just like, I haven't really found anyone that I want to cuddle me, and yet I really want to be cuddled.
See, and that's it right there too. Like, when I think about the sexuality piece, even, like, is it more about, I haven't found someone that I want to cuddle me. I haven't found somebody that I want to channel this energy into, right?
Totally.
Even though I have the desire for it, like,
Yeah.
the receptacle isn't there.
No, exactly. And that's a really important thing to honor. Like, the signal of like no is
Yes.
very clear in me. And it's definitely not like, oh, I'm guarded. No, no, no. It's like I have not gotten that yes. And yeah, I mean, we could go on, but I think that the really important thing that I want to leave everyone with that's been really helpful for me is, and I have been working with the same somatic therapist for now 3 or 4 years around these kinds of things, not necessarily with your specialty, which is why I'm like, oh, I should probably have some sessions with Marissa. But the main thing is like the normalization of this topic is super important, because there's so much shame wrapped into the female experience often, and this inner feminine, not to say men don't also experience this, but it does statistically tend to be a more of a women's issue, whereas men tend to turn more towards alcohol and drugs. And I just want to normalize it, that I want my listeners to know this is something that I still struggle with, and that you're not alone, because that's really been important for me to know that some of the most I've been hanging out with a lot of cool, successful, powerful people who've done things that I really admire. And one of the things that I'm really realizing upon doing that is that they all have dealt with alcoholism, food addiction, porn addiction. Some of them still deal with eating disordered eating. Like, we think that we're seeing these influencers on Instagram or reading somebody's book about God or eating and thinking that they have it all together. And I think that's just such the principal message I want to instill in Shakti School. It's like, we are a group of women who believe that women have the power to uplift one another and change themselves in radical ways, but nobody here is perfect.
Yeah, and I want to be uplifted by somebody who knows what the heck I'm going through and what I'm struggling with, I remember,
And compassion.
yeah,
Compassion comes from this.
yes, 100%. And just like I would steer clear of any dogmatic Ayurvedic teachings, I would also steer clear of any dogmatic Instagram people or therapists or whomever, because if anyone is presenting to you like they don't struggle and they've got everything together 100% of the time,
Run in the other direction.
yeah, that's shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with this too, and it's why I'm so passionate about sharing it with other people. And I started struggling with it really early in my life, and thank goodness I found somatics and Ayurveda, because that really is what started to change things for me. But my awareness of my continual struggle with these things is what keeps developing my compassion, is what keeps connecting me back to spirit, right? Is what helps keep me clear. Struggle isn't bad.
No.
Struggle is an opportunity to say, where did I fall asleep a little bit? How
Yeah,
can I come back?
that's the pulsation of the goddess. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 back is a very tantric philosophical tenet. And I love the whole idea of, but for the grace of God, there go I. Like, the only thing that will keep me centered is spirit. You call spirit, I call God, whatever we call it, right? Is like, oh, I just want to say this in case my mom listens to this podcast, because she usually does. Like, I had such a good mama, but my mama didn't get taught how to eat by her mother. And she learned this from her mother. And my grandmother didn't even have a mom, And it's like, when I think about my grandmother not having a mom, and then my sweet grandma Mary Bell, who was in the 1940s and 50s and 30s, literally a kitchen slave, like couldn't leave the kitchen making food for men on the farm all day long. And all she wanted when she was in her 50s and 60s was a dishwasher. That was like enlightenment for her and freedom. And from that, to my mom, who was like 1970s and 80s 90s power women, like, get out of the kitchen, we're never going back, and like, just do everything fast, and Weight Watchers and low carb, and like, or actually it was high carb, no fat, and how I got that download. And I just feel like we're in that next iteration of the lineage of our mothers and our grandmothers' relationships to food. And in no way, shape, or form is this a judgment against our mothers, because they really didn't get that teaching, Marissa, that you are giving your daughter when you hold her and you bless the food and you teach her as she starts to grow up her intuition. I know you'll do that. Like, we have to really honor the fact that our moms didn't get that, and you cannot give what you have not lived and experienced. And so I think about that, and I just want to pay deep respect and honor to not only my mom and my grandmom, but all of our mothers and those lineages, that we be so bold to think we're any better. It's such a fallacy. The humility of how much you and I, Marissa, are so blessed. You went to Naropa. I got a master's degree. I mean, we go to Shakti school, where we have 30 teachers who are teaching conscious living. I mean, our mothers and grandmothers can't even imagine this. And so I really want to just remind all of us of that we are the end result of their struggles. And what an honor to rewire. One of the things in shamanism and in Tarpana practice that my friend Mare and I were doing a couple months ago was, in honor of my grandmother and my mother, you make a place for them at the table, even when they're not there, even when they're dead, and you feed them. And this is what the ancients do. Like, you feed them a little bit of your plate. And the unintended good side effect of that honoring is that you actually take them out of your body. So that's what I think is so important. Like, I'm still wondering how much of these cravings are mine, and how much is it the unprocessed emotion of all the women in my family.
Yeah, it's a lot of that, for sure.
Whose only outlet was food.
Yeah. And you even said that mom and grandma had the peanut butter sandwich, like, you see how that gets wired into your cells. And it is a privilege, it is a privilege to be able to do this work, to be able to see that lineage and to begin to tweak it, because we don't want to change it completely, right? We want to be in our lineage of women to some degree. But what we want to do is further digest and further process what they left undigested, and thank them for what they were able to digest and process.
I didn't even ask. Like, I remember Kate Stillman being like, is this grandma, whatever her grandma, is this her craving this cookie or me? You know, and I think on my dad's side, my Granny Ruby, like, she got government cheese back in the day. I mean, she's very, very, very poor in the American South. And like, oh my God, do I love me some like really crappy cheese? It's like,
Mhm.
wow, this has to be her. It's so compelling.
Yeah, and then I mean, you could even go into like what happens in the womb during pregnancy, right? And the cravings of the mother and how they're based on the cravings of the embryo. And was Grandma Ruby eating lots of that cheese when she was pregnant, right? And how did that get
Wow.
infused into your parents' cells and then into your cells? I think it's really potent. And that's why we never want to say like, oh, this food is bad, right? This is a good food, this is a bad food, this is a clean food, this is a dirty food.
Yeah.
um, because everything is an offering and everything has value.
Yeah.
It
Oh my
really.
God, I would love to get you on the call with like all these. I'm not going to name any names, but this is like probably another longer conversation we should have next year sometime, Marissa. This is a big issue, and I've seen it affect a number of my male friends.
Mm,
Manorexia is a thing. It is way more common than we all know. And I've seen it in the community, like the biohacking community. It's so big where these guys are only eating meat.
yeah.
I'm like, now kale's not even allowed. I'm like, now like oxalates aren't even allowed. And I'm just like, this is not, I'm sorry, something inside of me just knows, is this some sort of like deep atonement that all these like well-to-do white men are like fasting and only eating one thing? Is this some sort of deep unconscious like reparations? Like what's going on? And I've seen it affect a number of my male friends, and but the thing is, many of them have lost a lot of weight. Many of them have reversed diabetic conditions and autoimmune conditions, and so you can see they do seem a lot more healthy, and yet there's this big so there's like a confusion around it for me.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes into like, what's the intention behind the action?
Hmm.
And is it well informed, or is it because that's what you saw at Whole Foods that day, or that's what the person on Instagram shared, right? Because there's a big difference between that. Like I have a type 2 diabetes, so I'm going to make these changes in my diet very intentionally and under medical guidance.
Right, very wise.
Yeah, versus like, oh, there's a new product at the store that so and so said on Instagram has helped him get more shredded, so I'm going to do that too because that's what I want.
Yeah.
And then we could even go into the emotional hunger of those guys, right? Like, how are they relating to their masculinity? Is it in the divine masculine or in the shadow masculine? I have a hunch, but
Oh my God. Okay, Marissa, I think this is a good place to close because we're going to leave everyone the cliffhanger. If you join Shakti School, Marissa is going to talk about the divine masculine versus shadow masculine and their hunger. Um, or we'll have you back to talk about that. I'm so grateful for you. I feel very raw in a good way, and and what I've been wanting to say this whole time that I've kind of been holding on my heart is there's a principle that we talk about in Shakti School in my classes, that the state that you hold is so much more important than the story you tell and the content of that story. And Marissa, whenever I'm with you, I can feel I feel so safe, and I just feel so held, and I feel like I'm in the presence of a true sister, and I just appreciate the state that you've cultivated in this lifetime, and I'm sure many many past lives, to get you where you are now. We're honored that you're a teacher here.
thank you, Katie. I love it. And I love talking with you about these things. I feel like we could keep going for
We really
hours.
I am going to reach out to you and have some personal sessions, and if anybody wants to find you, we're going to put Marissa's website in the show notes, although I'm sure she's quite busy with the baby. Anybody out there listening, remember Shakti School does start January 12th. And if you guys mention the podcast that you heard with Marissa, we'll give you $100 off. So write my staff, info@theshaktyschool.com and just mention Marissa's podcast, and we're going to give you a special discount just to be loving and fun.
Woohoo! Do it, everybody.
Thank you so much, Marissa.
Thank you.
फूटे फूल